Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Keating, and today I'm going to talk about participant observation within the anthropological field as a research method. Before we begin to discuss participant observation, we need to know what it is at its base. Simplistically, participant observation is a holistic approach to research. What this means is that while engaging in participant observation, you will be taking part in day-to-day activities as you would as a member of a given culture. According to the textbook written by Gary Ferraro and Elizabeth Brody, the text says, when cultural anthropologists use participant observation, they share in the everyday activities of the local people while making systematic observations of people eating, working, playing, conversing, dancing, exchanging foods, fighting, or any other activity that might illuminate their cultural patterns. This is from page 4 of the textbook when they are first introducing this research method. Participant observation is how a researching anthropologist is able to be fully immersed in a culture for that holistic research experience that is required in order to separate it from standard observation. My objectives today in giving this presentation about participant observation include the following items. First, I will talk about the history of participant observation and how, through the years, it has become a trusted method of research through trial and error and being built upon over time. Next, it will be very important for me to describe the difference between standard observation and participant observation, because a lot of the times these two things can be mixed up and seen as the same thing when they are clearly different. I want to talk today about the benefits and limitations of participant observation so that we can see the pros and cons of this research method. Next, because anthropology is really focused on how people interact in a natural everyday setting, I want to explain how participant observation is important in the natural everyday setting. I will also explain the holistic approach to research and why it is a very reliable approach to anthropological research. Lastly, I will describe how the prior concepts have been shown in past examples of participant observation, including the first ever documented American anthropologist to do this sort of observation. To provide a brief history and background of participant observation, it has been a relevant form of research for over a century, with the first instance actually being in 1879 when Frank Hamilton Cushing, an American researcher and anthropologist, spent 4.5 years with the Zuni Pueblo people in New Mexico. Cushing became a real citizen of the Zuni people and was able to fully immerse himself into a foreign culture. Because of this holistic approach that Cushing took in his research, he is credited with being the first American anthropologist to engage in what is today called participant observation. In order to separate observation and participant observation, I'm going to talk about the drawbacks and benefits of both research methods. Standard observation is something that a beginning anthropologist can do to first understand the concepts of anthropology. Even in our class, we used standard observation in order to first understand these concepts. Standard observation can be done by any one person at any one time. The main benefits of standard observation are that it does not require a lot of time and is a great introduction to the basic elements of anthropology. While standard observation introduces you to the simple concepts of anthropology, and also does not require a lot of time, it does not benefit from the holistic approach that participant observation benefits from, and it also lacks the abundance of data that benefits participant observation and gives participant observation its validity. I will now talk about the benefits of participant observation as it relates to standard observation and why participant observation is often more scientific as a research method. To start off, participant observation obviously benefits from the holistic approach to anthropology. This means that when engaging in participant observation, you are seeing all aspects of a culture as you are completely immersing yourself in the culture that you are researching. Next, participant observation also has the benefit of usually having more data to draw from. This means that a researching anthropologist is able to compare quantitative as well as qualitative findings with other findings in order to reach a much more conclusive data outcome. This is talked about in Barbara Kowalick's article titled Participant Observation as a Data Collection Method, when she writes, "Validity is stronger with the use of additional strategies used with observation, such as interviewing, document analysis, or surveys, questionnaires, or other more quantitative methods." On top of there being simply more data to draw from, participant observation also has the holistic approach. So those two things stacked together adds even more data to the pool and makes it much more reliable. I will now begin to discuss the drawbacks of participant observation. While participant observation is very useful, it is also very time-consuming and difficult for the average person to do. What I mean by this is that participant observation requires the researcher to be completely dedicated to anthropology to the point where this person is willing to completely leave a native culture in order to go live with another one, which is completely implied by the holistic approach to anthropology. So, while this is good for a dedicated research anthropologist, it may not be good for someone who's just beginning in anthropology, and that's okay because this is seen as a very professional approach. The ethical concerns of participant observation are also outlined in an article written by Julie Zale titled Privacy, Informed Consent, and Participant Observation, when she writes, beginning quote, "A participant observation researcher is typically part of or present in the situation that she studies. Simply in virtue of being present, the researcher may violate the privacy of other participants in a situation." End quote. So, because participant observation involves taking part in a real personal life of someone in another culture, it is important for the researching anthropologist to make sure that it is okay with the native people for this anthropologist to report back on findings. This requires something called informed consent, and this type of informed consent should be enforced on a case-by-case basis, and it is up to the researcher and all involved parties to decide what things can and cannot be reported on. What I mean by this is that there should not be strict enforcement, but it should go on an honor code of the researching anthropologist. Another concern of participant observation is that the ethnographer may actually do what's called going native, as David Graeber, another anthropologist, calls it. Going native is what happens when the researcher gets accepted within a culture to the point where the researcher does not want to even go back. While the researcher is happier this way, that makes it not a real concern for the researcher personally, but it can be problematic when considering the fact that this will interrupt the research being done. So from a scientific point of view, yes, it's problematic, but from a personal point of view, no, it's not problematic. This will be further discussed later in my presentation when I will show an example of this actually happening. Moving on to the importance of participant observation in the natural setting. Participant observation can really only be conducted in the natural setting due to its holistic nature. This lends itself to being used in real-world situations. If it's not a real-world situation, then it can't be participant observation, and that would also be non-holistic. A non-holistic approach would not fit the requirements of participant observation, due to the fact that participant observation requires the researcher to be fully immersed in a culture. Now, touching on the reliability of participant observation has the benefit of being reliable due to the fact that its holistic approach allows to draw from so many sources to get needed information. The information that is required from participant observation often includes quantitative data that can be used to reaffirm the findings of the anthropologist. A statistical method, quite similar, is something known as standard deviation. Typically, when two things are correlated due to sufficient evidence, a larger pool of data will lead to a lower deviation between the findings, that is, if the findings are true. All of these things put together will inevitably lead to the data being more reliable. I will now relate these concepts to past examples of participant observation. As stated earlier in the presentation, Frank Hamilton Cushing spent 4.5 years with the Zuni Pueblo people of New Mexico. He actually immersed himself so deeply within their culture that he actually did in fact end up going native, which was talked about as one of the drawbacks of participant observation. By fully immersing himself with the native people, he was able to be accepted into something called the Priesthood of the Bow. This is a Zuni organization that is responsible for regulating problems such as war, internal conflicts, and they also limit external influences from entering their culture. It is in fact very noteworthy that Cushing, who was a member of the media at the time, was able to join this priesthood. Cushing wrote heavily about his experiences in the form of academic articles about what it was like living with the Zuni Pueblo people. He essentially made the media aware of a culture that they were not otherwise aware of. This is talked about in a passage from PBS.org, where the passage says, "The Zuni received enormous attention from the media and the Eastern elite during their tour, which was typical of the spectacle mounted whenever Indians visited civilized society." This is really what is astonishing, considering Cushing's membership in the Priesthood of the Bow. In conclusion, participant observation is a holistic approach to research, in which a researcher takes part in the day-to-day activities of a given culture. Frank Hamilton Cushing is known as the first American anthropologist to conduct this kind of research. While participant observation is an internal, holistic method, standard observation is an external, simplistic research method. What this means is that while standard observation is fast and simple, participant observation takes a long time, but is also very reliable. When it comes to the natural setting, you need the natural setting in order to achieve a holistic research outcome. A lot of the benefits and limitations of participant observation are shown in the example of Frank Hamilton Cushing's research with the Zuni people of New Mexico.